Buenas tardes. Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. I'll be able to speak a little bit slower, because in Australia we've been told we speak too fast. So I'll speak a little bit more deliberate, and if I speak too fast, please say so. But the presentation purpose is to provide a holistic look at security and how it applies to Elastix. It's divided into four main sections, which include a quick look at toll fraud to set the context, a review of the methods of securing Elastix at the install and pre-production phase, a look at prevention techniques whilst the system is in production, and finally a look at monitoring to limit the exposure in the event of toll fraud occurring. Before we proceed any further, I want to go over a few basic security realities. I believe most of you know these facts, but I want to go over to reinforce them. No functional IPVX system can be 100% secure. It's a hard fact. You cannot guarantee to a client or to your company that your system is 100% secure. Costs of achieving close to 100% security are exponential in costs. And as you all know, the security of a system is as strong as your weakest link. Toll fraud is nothing new. As I said there, it's been around as long as phone systems have been in use. To use the Webster online dictionary, toll fraud is described as a crime in which a hacker obtains telecommunication services by breaching computer security, using or selling stolen long-distance credit card codes, or accessing a private branch exchange and using its communications facilities illegally. It can be done by various methods, which include, but are not limited to, code generation, via modem access for some of the legacy PBXs, accessing a PBX by the DISA, I'll go through it later, accessing a PBX by voicemail services, and what we most know, SIP hacking via the internet. As I mentioned, it's nothing new, but now the sheer number of IPVX systems being put online has now brought toll fraud back up to the front again. In fact, there's not one day I don't hear of a toll fraud. And it's not just the domain of open source PBX systems. Many manufacturers, Toshiba, Avaya, all have similar problems with their IPVX systems, so this is not just related to Elastix. Toll fraud is a real issue. It's not nothing that happens to the next guy, it can happen to you. Toll fraud is committed by criminal elements, and in some cases, well, what we're told, it includes terrorist organisations as well. It's also committed by hackers looking for a thrill. So I'm going to show their mate or friend that they're capable of hacking a system. In 2009, communications fraud is estimated to globally cost between $72 and $80 billion US. So it's a very large market. And that's the systems which actually reported the fraud. Right, thank you. Toll fraud, what's the potential damage? On any one toll fraud, especially at the moment, between 20,000 and 50,000 per incident. And this is happening, as I said, every single day. Even before I left, there's something I'll show you through in this run through shortly. That customer was done for $20,000. Before I left on the plane, another one was done for $40,000. And this is all done over a period of even one weekend. It's not just the costs, the actual direct costs, it's also the cost of the business. They lose confidence in the IPVX system, they have to shut their system down, It's loss of calls, loss of business. It's a loss of business confidence in their product as well. In other words, they lose confidence in their phone system. Every time there's some sort of issue, they're worried. They spend more time worrying about the system. Then it's also thinking about who's responsible for the toll fraud, who's going to pay up, and spending the time trying to get through the courts, spending the time investigating who caused it, how they can get their money back. And in many cases, you can't. So what do they gain from toll fraud? One of the areas is phone cards. There are a large number of phone cards that are created throughout the world, and there's very little regulation. So these phone cards can be made up by the local printer, and they can actually produce a system. It might be even another hack system that they post the phone calls through. And on these phone cards, they'll ring a particular number, and they'll actually go through, and it might be calls. It's normally quite often calls to some of the long distance, large cost destinations, usually $1.92 a minute. So if you imagine somebody sits on there and they probably 100, 200, 300 people, all of these phone cards, all making these calls. There's also the revenue from selling the gateway numbers. They actually pick up $5,000 to $10,000 per number they can offer and sell. And then, as I said, there's a challenge for hackers. Just want to show their friends that they can do it. And in some cases, they'll choose premium number services just to show they can use it. In most cases, toll fraud is highly organised and smart. It's not just a random event. They actually pick their times. In most cases, on Friday nights. It's the most common time. It's not the only time. But they do know the time frames. They choose to hack systems that are actually meant for those particular times. So they know on Friday night, nobody's going to be in the office. In most cases, nobody's going to be in the office on Saturday and Sunday. So by the time you realise, Monday morning, and you're up to 40,000. They're also holiday aware. They know what the times are. The most common times that we see these hacks take place is during the holiday period. And that's why we monitor, in particular, during the holiday period. We spend a lot more time monitoring. And coincidentally, that's where the most amount of calls, especially overseas, want to be made, is during the holiday period. So it's a nice market for them. That's when they generate the most sales in their phone cards. And so it's a perfect time for them. It's a nice correlation. Just going to quickly go through an analysis of a super attack. I believe some guys from Neo Central will be doing more in detail tomorrow. But I've just set the context to show you that it's real. It's not something that is maybe happen. It does happen. It happens every day. I get calls about it every day. And hopefully, the majority of them are to do with our systems. They're normally systems that somebody else is putting. The first step of a toll attack is normally a SIP port probe on your service. So look for open ports on the router at 5060 in most cases. We have watched them also look after 5060 through to 5084. Okay, it's easy to modify the program, they just do it. As I said here, we'll use 5060 in this case as a simple one, and they build a database on where those ports are. So they may not attack your system immediately, they will actually build up a whole database of all the systems that they can actually use. This is not an in-depth, as I said, detail, but just showing you some logs of a real system. The IP address has been changed for the client's purpose, but this is actually a real attack that occurred. Just very quickly, this is out of the logs. We've also got in-depth SIP analysis and also packet analysis of most systems when they get hacked. But this one here is just a copy of the logs to show you something simply. But here is actually the system running through, checking the live extensions. As you can see here, they've actually got all the extensions enabled between these numbers. But you notice here the gap between 970 and 985, and also the gap here between 986 and 991. That means they're actually seeing these SIP extensions return a response, which then tells them there is actually an extension number. So now they build up this database, we'll see down here. They build up a database of all the extension numbers that are actually replying. So it doesn't mean they're hacked in yet, they're just building a database of all the IP, of all the extensions. And we move on to the dictionary attack, which actually is probing those extensions with a dictionary. And another saying that they're using a full list of words. As you can see from here, the registration in 97, they got the wrong password, they kept going down until finally they get an extension with the right password, and they've then registered at that point. They've now got the basis to use your telephone system for phone calls. As you can see there, just get it blown up for you. But, we're on the next slide. Just go through a few quick hard facts on how they do this. They actually know the tricks of adding a couple of numbers on the end of the dictionary words. So in other words, you've got Apple 02. Quite often they're actually now becoming quite smart. They're adding the numbers onto the end. They also use a combination of a number generator as well, which means if you've chosen a long number, it might be even up to 10,000. One of those numbers there will take no time at all to break that. It's one of the most first things they do is actually run through a complete set of numbers, because they know the most common fault with most people who put IPv6 systems in is that they use the extension number as the password. I know most of you guys probably know it, but there's also a lot more people out there who are putting in Elastix systems for the first time, and this is what's happening. And even as implementers, you've also got to pick, when you actually look after a brand new Elastix system you've been asked to take over and look after it, first thing you've actually got to do is a security review on every single part. It needs to be done because I've seen systems where they've had someone else come in, they've not looked at it, they've put some more SIP trunks onto Elastix, and they've actually opened up the whole system. And as we go down here, just some hard facts on a simple ADSL line, which might be 12 meg, 1 meg up. Extension harvester can do 80 extensions per second. The dictionary attack, 60 passwords per second. And the entire Oxford dictionary, if they use just those words alone, can be completed in less than 3 hours. So using an English word or in your Mexico, in your dictionaries, you can't rely on that, just using simple words. They must be complex passwords. Sorry, we're running ahead with our notes. So just to go over a couple of quick summaries. SIP hacking tools are readily available and free. There's about 4 sites that I know of that have actually working applications that you can use. You can go home and get them right now and start trying to hack the system. So it's not like this is just something you can, it's only found in small groups. It's actually, they're really available. As I said, ZipVicious is one of those, one of the most well-known ones. As I said, toll for it costs money, and it can happen to anyone. And securing, prevention, monitoring is of the utmost importance. We'll now look at a high overview of some of the simple techniques to reduce the probability. As I said, there's no 100% guarantee in this business. Now, to give you an analogy, you leave your home and leave the doors wide open, there's a very good probability that somebody's going to your home. You at least close the front door, still not going to guarantee that you're never going to be invaded, but at least it reduces the possibility. The same applies to an IPv6 system. The thing we'll look at is extension security. Don't use simple words, as I've just mentioned before, even with a couple of numbers on the end. Start looking at complex passwords. Simple thing again, do not use extension number as password. Passwords like the one I just put there, which is actually using almost all the characters on the keyboard. And that's uppercase, lowercase, numbers, including symbol keys. That password there, I normally stick the passwords of at least 12 characters in length and using all of those characters. Also, don't repeat the characters. It's quicker for them to actually decode what password you want, test all the passwords you're using. That password there, just to give you an idea, will take them, based on an ADSL line, will take them close to, I think it was 33 days to actually work it out. Okay? And most will give up on your system by then, we hope. Use the permit and deny for each extension. Start limiting where your extensions can log in from. Most systems, especially most Elastix systems, go in with the default, which is nothing. Okay? There's reasons for this too. There's also, there's no reason why you can't be intact internally either. Excuse me, sorry. Remote extensions. This is another area that is constant. People open up port 5060 to actually allow remote extensions in. And again, it's one of the features of IPPX systems, but it is also the downfall as well. The other thing you can do is change the SIP port for the phone extension. I won't go into it too much. There are things that need to be considered when you do it, but it is something that's available to us. One of the things we always do is we recommend remote extensions. Anybody who wishes to use a remote phone, they obtain a static IP address. Now, by itself, it's not going to help, but it actually allows you to at least put in, as I mentioned, the permit and deny rules, allows you to set your firewall rules only to let that address in, so you are limiting who you're opening port 5060 to, or your SIP port. Look at phones. The particular one I have here is the T28, and I believe the T26 does it as well. They have a built-in VPN client. So in that case, you don't need to open up the SIP port. These phones will actually connect into Elastix. You need to install OpenVPN on Elastix, but it's a very simple thing to do. We use, ourselves in Australia, we use OpenVPN for every single thing we do. As trunk security, connections to remote phones, it's connecting several PAXs together. It's very secure. We haven't found a reason not to trust it at the moment, and especially with both shared key and certificate security on the OpenVPN, very strong. And the same with soft phones. We normally recommend an OpenVPN. Now, whether that VPN is an OpenVPN or it's PPTP, at least something basic to stop simple intrusion. Okay, securing the actual Elastix box itself. Since 2.0, you get to set all the passwords at install time. One of the best things that was done. Don't use the same password for root, MySQL, and any of the add-on products. The thing is, you're only going to have a flaw in one of these products, even a flaw that nobody knows about. They are getting the password. Naturally, they can probably guess that you've used the same password in every other part of the system. We strongly recommend against implementing Visa, unless you really require it. There are other solutions instead of using these for some purposes. And in fact, on all systems, when we implement them, we actually get a customer to sign off that they will not turn on Visa. Okay? If the service has been available even on some of the old legacy systems, and it was the most common way they actually got into the system. Not on the SIP. If you don't need it, turn it off. Now, we watch a lot of people where they just find that's the quickest way to get one of their trunks working or one of those products. If you can, spend the time making sure you're using trunking or whatever it may be that does not use another SIP. By itself, it's not insecure, but with other areas, as I said, several layers, you need to make sure that layer is turned off, the next layer is protected, and the next layer. Another quick thing to do is change the SSH port. Very quick and simple to do in the config file. Okay. Just change it to some other arbitrary port. Securing your network. This is probably outside of Elastix to a degree. You may not have control, but in most cases, we're the ones looking after the SIP, or at least making the recommendations. So don't just open up the SIP RCP ports by default. It's one of the most common things I've seen. They just open up, thinking that's just going to make life easy. Again, at the same time, I said we open up port 506 we're applying the for attack. Not all firewalls and browsers are the same. Take the time to actually learn what the firewall is capable of doing, actually testing it. We stick with a particular model of firewall, and because we spent the time, we've learned what it can and can't do. If the router firewall has VPN capability, use it. As I spoke back, you can use OpenVPN, and if your router's got it on there and you want to make your life easy, use the VPN capability for everything. Whether it's connecting back to another client, back to another remote office, whether it's putting in your director's phone, just use it on all occasions, and even maintenance. Use a VPN. As I said there, if it doesn't, consider implementing OpenVPN. It works well. It works very well, actually. Thank you. Securing Elastix using the Elastix firewall. Elastix 2.2, as you've all read, will have built-in firewall GUI. It's basically a wrapper around IP tables. We've always used IP tables ourselves, but this just makes it a little bit easier for people to use it, especially if you haven't spent the time with IP tables. I've spent the time working with IP chains from so many years ago, so IP tables, something else I've worked with. I've also spent a large amount of time with a product called IPCOP back about 7 years ago, so I found it very natural and easy to use, but I actually like the GUI. Pre-configured with most ports used by Elastix. It's visually easy to understand and manually configure IP tables. And one of the best firewall GUIs I've seen for a while. It's simple, it's easy, it does its job. Trunk security. Look for voice providers, they can actually provide you a SIP trunk through a VPN. We've started doing that now, and we're finding it again. We're not having to open up the floor. They actually provide an open VPN channel all the way through. It's a new breed of voice providers that are doing this. They're starting to realise that it's not all about cost. They can actually charge an extra 2 cents a call. Now people are actually interested in those security features. So instead of just being the cheapest voice provider, they actually become the most feature-rich voice provider. And they are winning the business. So consider using IEX trunks between offices and further securing them with RSA keys. Okay, again, another very strong thing. Or, as I said, if you can't use it again, use the RSA keys. It's your choice, but at least don't open it up and just leave them open. Take the time to understand trunks and what each configuration line needs to do security. One of the biggest problems is there's so much information available on the internet about trunks and how to configure them. A majority of the information, I'd have to say 60% of it is actually wrong, or at least poorly constructed. They don't understand what they've written in there, it works, so I'll publish it. And it's actually wrong. I'd love to go further into that in this talk, but I've only got so many minutes. Elastic security prevention, and I've moved on to the next area, which is actually preventing attacks. One of the most common things I see is people actually using the PBX server as a solution to actually install some other product they need, such as an FTP server. And on several occasions I've seen people put FTP servers in, public FTP, and they've actually been hacked that way. Not so much a SIP attack, they've actually done a SSH brute force attack and have root access to the whole system. Webmin, I know a lot of people like it, I like the product, but I don't think it has a place on the box itself. Not so much for yourselves, you know what you're doing, but what it does, it opens it up to then getting someone else involved with the PBX system. He goes in thinking he's doing the right thing, configuring things through Webmin, and has no understanding of what he's actually installing or what he's configuring. And as I mentioned, the FTP service, there's no need for it. I will always We're never talking to a client they want to install anything else that is not within the realm of the Elastix system, or an add-on product, or a solution that's going to give them better benefit in securing the system. I normally recommend not installing it on there. And something that not a lot of people consider too is change control. Okay. It's normally one of those words you hear a lot in the corporate environments. I've worked in the corporate environment, and we didn't get through a day where we didn't mention change control. We had to have a meeting and change control every day before anything was done in the system. Now, it does not mean we have to go to that length for here, but at least implement some sort of change control system. As I said, it can be as complex or as simple as you want, but in cases now with most of our clients, if they're going to make changes to the environment, that includes the firewall, the network, or the Elastix box, they keep us informed. Even if they just send us an email saying for your information, at least at that point we can make a change. If we find out 4 weeks later, 5 weeks later, it's too late. Usually the people are in. In fact, what we're finding now, the minute you open up port 5060, within 48 hours, they're probing your port. And that's in Australia. I'm not sure if it's the rest of the world, but in Australia, that's what we're finding. As mentioned before, use the VPN if you can. Don't need to go over that again. But again, as I said, in most cases, you'll find no excuse for opening up the SIP port. It's also the preventing international calls in particular. That's where your cost is going to come from. Making a few local calls is not going to matter, but making international calls. One of the new features in Elastix 2.2 with the FreeBDX 2.8 is actually you can limit outbound trunks based on time conditions. So at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock on Friday afternoon, you can stop your system making calls out by setting a time condition. So at least if it happens, you're going to understand it's happening. And as I said, most times that people get defrauded is over the weekend. Limit the international destinations. One of the most common things we do is for international destinations, we put in the international code and we use the full stop. Okay? Now, that just means every single call to anywhere in the world can be made. Now, quite often, most businesses, they have specific locations they need to make international calls to. Then at least put it into your outbound routers, only those calls to those countries can be made. Okay? If you need to have more, then start building a list, but I do know there are limitations, at least in terms of it reading a list. So it's something a little bit harder. It's just another one of those features. This is not one specific feature that's going to skew your whole system. It's looking at all these, it's thinking about them as you do them. Another thing we're finding is, again, I spoke about feature-rich voice providers, is also finding even a SIP provider or an E1 or T1 provider that will at least let you set limits on your data usage. Now, for most small to medium businesses, they don't make any more than $100 or $200 calls a day. Very easy to set with some of these new feature-rich providers, set a limit. And you set $100 or $200, and that way, when the system reaches that limit, it stops you dialing out. Okay? Again, if you had that over the weekend, your limit when you come back in on what you found out you've been hacked over the weekend, at least when you come in, you're up for $400, $500. A nice simple lesson. This is a very expensive one. There's also, even though I put it in prevention, it is also part of monitoring as well. You've actually got everybody monitoring, when you can't make calls out, very, very clear that there's something going wrong. The last phase of it is actually Elastic security monitoring. As I mentioned, trying to get the 95%, it's a good idea. Trying to get the last 5%, it's going to cost you a lot of money, and it's almost impossible unless you spend all your time, and that's it. You're not going to reach that thing. So the other 5% is actually implementing monitoring. Actually, monitoring is going to tell you when something's going wrong. One of the things we do a lot of, especially with new clients, or any new clients we have, and any client that we actually get involved with, is that we get them to take up regular maintenance. First of all, it builds the client relationship. Secondly, it means that we're actually looking at this system every single month. Okay? We've done a lot earlier if that's needed, but at least we find every month that we're checking the system, we're looking at things. So it's actually a service you can sell, you know, if you're an implementer. We do simple maintenance, which is actually testing the set port externally. We use a couple of tests for that. We also check the logs, and we check the call logs as well. We don't spend all that time looking through every single call, but we at least do some spot checks and make sure the basics are being done. As I mentioned, monitoring is also looking at log review. We regularly look at the logs, the messages log, the secure log, and the full log. We're looking at all those each time. They gives an indication there's something going wrong. We also, if a customer rings us and says a couple of phones have flashed different times, or they went offline, or the colours on the lights changed, or anything that will give us an idea. So at any time that happens, we take a look at the system again with that maintenance contract or maintenance arrangement in place. You can just go ahead and do it and check it immediately. You don't spend time trying to discuss whether it's worth it and whether they're going to pay for it. It's already paid for as part of the contract arrangement. One of the other features that's coming out as part of the add-ons in Elastix 2.2 is the ability to just implement Humbug. Now, Humbug is a commercial service, but it's one of those services that really does help. Humbug by itself, the free version, just allows you to do analytics. Paid version, at $4.99, starting at $4.99, it allows you to look at some of the key indicators. That means also looking at the changes in statistics. So your call volume has increased by double. So it alerts you to those facts by SMS, email, and that's important too. It's not just relying on the provider telling you there's something wrong, because quite often they don't come until Monday, it's too late. You need to know on Saturday or Friday night when it's actually happened. But for a small cost, and they've kept it reasonably small, for the number of calls that you take is quite good. One of the other things that most people forget again is also reviewing the logs of the firewall itself. Not the Elastix firewall, I'm talking about the network itself. Many organizations just put in the firewall, believe that's it, they're protected, and they don't bother checking. It also gives you an idea of whether they're actually being attacked. If somebody's actually doing a search on the outside, it's very easy to implement on most routers and most firewalls is syslog and actually have it so it tells you what's going on. But in particular, we review for scans on 5060, we check to see if that's been done. And also, if that is happening, we actually then increase the checks. The other thing we implement for most of them is network management. Now, we may implement it either locally or we actually do it as an external service. And again, we're watching the PADs, we're watching how many calls are made. Humbug does similar sort of things, so you may decide that's not necessary, but if they've already got a monitoring solution, use it. SNMP can be turned on in Elastix quite easily. And it's quite useful to do so, because those facts and figures that you need to know what's going on. In particular, after an event's occurred, also it's useful to find what's actually happened, what the issue was like. Monitoring, you might think, well, all this security review, all this security time, I'm going to spend national security systems, who pays for it? And that's why we get the client to actually look at maintenance contracts. We also look at actual monitoring contracts. So we actually split them up and let them choose the level they want. Monitoring means we just keep it very basic and we look after it. And that's after security system, by the way. It's not just do it and hope we find something. We also look at selling monitoring contracts to our clients. And then also for our clients, at least a yearly review of their security, and going back through, checking everything, see if somebody's actually done anything they should have. So it doesn't have to cost you, as the integrator, it shouldn't need to cost you. It's actually the customer who's actually going to be responsible for the costs. So if they start complaining about that 1 hour or 2 extra hours you charge per month for monitoring, point out to them very clearly that the cost could be much more. So just a quick common mistakes of security. No time is quoted for security review after the actual implementation. That is absolutely important. We have a matrix where every time we do uploads, we make sure the security is on there. It's 4 hours security. Now it's not in depth, but at least we check all the basics and make sure all of these things I've spoken about are implemented. There's the thinking it won't happen to me. It will happen to you at some time if you've got an unsecured system. Especially before installing other software on systems. In most cases, it's not you doing it. It's someone else comes along, finds they've got a Linux system there, which is useful to them, and they install a private cloud. And unbeknownst to you, 3 months down the track, they've then been hacked. There's not much you can do about it. And the other thing is having multiple implementation vendors, one for Elastix, one for the firewall, one for the network, an IT manager. You've got to bring them all together. It's actually, in many cases, each one of those vendors doesn't fully understand the implications. It's up to you to actually make that very clear. Right at the install, or even before the install if necessary. Set the actual expectation that you need to know when some changes are made to the environment. How can I implement some of these suggestions? You can review this presentation in your own time. I'll make sure it's publicly available if you want to read it. Think holistically about your security. As I said, a lot of people do that 1 or 2 quick things that are going to make it secure. And in many cases, it's going to, but it's actually thinking about the whole package. And as we've always had in the financial industry many years ago, we always made sure we had 3 distinct layers of security. In this case, we're able to firewall, the Elastix firewall, file ban, if you're going to use that, complex passwords, VPNs, all of those areas, they all matter. And at least if you put 3 layers in, somebody breaks one of those layers, goes with an extension on with a password that shouldn't be there, at least you've got those other layers to take look after you, at least until you've done your maintenance review at the end of the month, or your security review every 6 months or every year. Elastix security, more info can be found at elastix.org. There's a security forum there, and I noticed a lot of people partake in actually talking about security. There's blogs and papers at elastix.org. Sorry for the registration mark in there. That's not part of it. Just making sure we cover ourselves. And there's also application notes for file ban, hard mode, Elastix firewall, enabling SMP, no else. All those are available on elastixconnection.com. There's more papers coming out every couple of days. If you actually want to be told when those papers are out, especially there's 1 or 2 in there which still wait to be released, if you follow on Twitter, at ElastixWorld, I always release, any time there's a new paper released, I always put it on there. And now to questions.
Bueno, ya tenemos la primera pregunta.
I have several clients that has mobile devices with software, but because of the budget, we don't have any appliance that can give us protection videos or something like that. What could be a good choice, for example, an Android or iPhone application that can provide us security for Windows? As I remember, OpenVPN is not supported these devices. How can we work with these devices under a security environment?
I understand what you're saying, yeah. It's actually something we've tackled. At the moment, there is no OpenVPN, easy OpenVPN capability on the Android or the iPhone. Probably never will be for the iPhone. So what we've actually implemented is a separate server for remote use. And what we do is actually then apply the security from that point backwards. So we use a different SIP port number on the remote box, and that remote box we keep out of the same environment. So we actually produce just a small box, doesn't have to be anything big, but all of the iPhones, even my iPhone and an Android device as well, all of those connect to that remote box. We do not allow any into the organisation where the primary telephone lines are. We also limit the what calls they can make as well. Almost in all cases, we actually stop any of the iPhones making calls out via the ISDN lines, or international calls at least. So that's how we tackle that. And I agree, it's one area that's hard to deal with at the moment. But we've done it by implementing a separate server and then put all the security layers in between that remote server and the internal server. Thank you.
Otra pregunta, por favor. La parte de acá adelante.
What firewall would you recommend to deal with RTP responses? Since I'm using right now short one, but I open a lot of GDP ports. What would you recommend for that?
Well, what we found is actually, in the past, one of the firewalls, and most people are not, don't think it as a professional device, they think of it more as a consumer device. But one of the routers we use a lot with the firewall built in is actually the Draytech. We find the Draytech router, technically, works extremely well. And we've implemented that. The only thing with the Draytechs, we do not use their VoIP models. Okay? We're aware of some problems with the VoIP model. But the actual router itself, the pure router, we find it very, very good. But in many cases, we'll use another one like PFSense as an appliance. Again, we find that very easy to work with. And then after that, we then use, as I said, OpenVPN to get past anything else in there. Anything we may do with the providers. So all our providers that we choose now have OpenVPN built in. We won't choose any provider that doesn't. In fact, when we're dealing with a client, we actually recommend they get off the current one they're on and onto one, those capabilities. And most clients realise what we're trying to do for them. And when I say those feature-rich, we're talking about features such as redundant services. We're talking about features where they can actually turn the system into a hosted system, so that companies lost access to the building or the building's burned up, they can grab 4 or 5 SIP phones and actually connect back in as a hosted service within minutes. So one of the things we do with Elastix, we just don't go out and sell Elastix, we sell the complete solution. And that means looking at redundancy, looking at failover, all that sort of thing. Making sure in many cases we can bring up a client back up within less than 8 hours, and that's their IT services, their telephone services, all virtualised. And so that's why we look at it. But sorry to jump off your question a little bit, but yeah, no, but yeah, with the firewalls we find and we've implemented, and I've actually personally put about 140 Draytechs in, and they continue to work. They're good, solid routers. I call it prosumer. They're slightly the consumer market, but they're also not as good as your Barracuda firewalls and short walls and so on. Okay.
Thank you.
Tenemos la última pregunta por acá.
Hello. Do you have an advice for secure Elastix or Elastix in virtualized environment, like OpenDZ or Zen?
When you talk about security, no, I have to admit I haven't done a lot. We've actually implemented on Zen. In fact, one of our remote services is also on Zen. Other than just the security around it and the discussions we've just had now about the basics, no, nothing else other than that, and making sure the environment you've got the Zen in is that we actually run Zen in a cloud service. Where I just spoke about the remote phones, we actually have the remote phones connected to Zen, and we secure everything around that. Okay, so what the holistic security around Zen itself. But other than that, no.
Muy bien, fuerte los aplausos para nuestro conferencista. Muchísimas gracias.
I personally like to thank the guys from Palo Santo. We're talking about Edgar and the rest of the crew there. Thank you for a very, very good product. And it's actually spent a lot of